was 1991. You look at what was big then. It was a lot of safe stuff. There was Mariah Carey, Whitney Houston, Michael Bolton, Taylor Dayne, Amy Grant. This was the year Garth Brooks started, and the soft Nashville stuff starts coming, and this is something that really needed to happen.
It's not an accident that Garth Brooks and Nirvana broke about the same time. Garth Brooks took the old rock fans, the soft rock fans, the Jackson Browne fans, the Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young fans. He took them away to country radio for a while. Rock and roll has to periodically reinvent itself, get younger.
At the time, you know, the music that was out there that was in the, you know, in the top of the charts, the rock and roll at least, was this horrible big hair metal by like Poison and these guys wearing more makeup than your mom, you know. And so for Nirvana to break through when they did, it just kind of was, personally for me, it was like, God, one of us made it through. Like, you could do this. You could get up there in your jeans and your t-shirt and not brush your hair and just like scream and rail, and it can be as cathartic as you want, and it can work. You don't have to have it funneled through the ideas of 1,600 music industry people and handlers and a big glossy video. It can just be this cool, scrappy thing that came from a garage.
The image was just fascinating, their looks and what they represented. Also the fact that this is now a city sound. There's a Seattle scene, and Nirvana begins the Seattle thing.
Seattle es una ciudad de la costa noroeste de los Estados Unidos. Nadie hubiera creído que sería un centro mundial de la música. Es verdad que allí nació Starbucks, Jimi Hendrix, Gypsy Rose Lee, los aviones Jet y el logo de la carita sonriente. Pero a fines del siglo XX, nadie suponía que sería la ciudad que revolucionaría el rock.
The live music scene in Seattle really sucked in the 80s. It mostly was cover bands. There weren't a lot of clubs. And in some ways, that actually helped, I think, the Seattle music scene, because bands decided to, well, there's not much else we can do. Let's make our own record.
There were 1 or 2 places to play original live music in Seattle. And there'd been 10 or 15 years of great bands, or what we thought were great bands in Seattle, who tried and who never got out. The only act from that area, there were 2 acts from the Seattle area who made money before the whole grunge thing happened. Kenny G and Heart. Those were not exactly templates that one wished to follow if one were a punk musician, say.
There was a geographic isolation that helped a lot too, that most of the bands from here really weren't inspired by other groups. They really followed their own muse, and in some ways I think that made them more original.
When Nirvana hit, you know, record companies, when something's hit and something is hot, rather than saying, hey, that was great, now let's go look for something else. When something hits, they want to keep that formula going. Hey, if Nirvana is going to sell millions of records, let's go get another Nirvana. So Nirvana's from Seattle, so let's go to Seattle. Well, usually that formula doesn't work, but in this case, there really was a very good music scene going on in Seattle. So when they would go to Seattle, they would find not only Nirvana, but Pearl Jam, but Alice in Chains, you know, Mother Love Bone at the time. There were all these bands, Soundgarden, that were in the Seattle area that were just kick-ass rock bands.
Nirvana tuvo su primer éxito con una discográfica local independiente llamada Sub Pop.
They were 2 of the smartest marketers and promoters the music industry has seen since Colonel Tom Parker made Elvis a star. Those 2 guys knew how to write ads, to design albums, to create a style.
Es evidente que ninguna discográfica prospera si no haya buenos artistas. Sub Pop fue la primera en grabar a Nirvana. Su éxito inició el auge de las grabaciones caseras, ya que la música considerada alternativa de pronto se volvió comercial.
They became these spokespeople, kind of the kings of the scene, as it were. And I know that Kurt always wanted to be successful. And I think he worked at his songwriting the way that, you know, any craftsperson works at their craft. You know, I don't think that it was just a spontaneous exercise in expression. I think that he really worked at these things and he made better and better songs.
He writes these incredibly dark and depressing songs about how life is shit and life is depressing. And yet, he's married and he just brought a child into the world. And I asked him why he did that. And he answered that
I really was a lot more negative and angry and everything else a few years ago. But that had a lot to do with not having a mate, you know, not having a steady girlfriend and stuff like that. So you know, that was one of the main things that was bothering me, that I wouldn't admit at the time, you know. So now that I've found that, the world seems a lot better for some reason, you know. It's just, it really does change your attitude about things.
A comienzos de los 90, en una casa en Olympia, en el estado de Washington, al sudeste de Seattle, Kurt Cobain escribió la mayoría de las canciones del álbum más conocido de Nirvana, Nevermind. Allí, en una pared de su cuarto, una amiga había escrito, Kurt huele a espíritu adolescente.
There was a, you know, sort of this little scene happening in Olympia at the time, and Kurt was kind of double dating with Dave Grohl, who was his roommate at the time, and there were a number of women, including Kathleen Hanna and Toby Vale, who eventually were going to form Bikini Kill and go on and do a number of things themselves. Kurt was interested in Toby, and Kathleen was taunting him about that, and Kathleen apparently wrote on the wall of Kurt's apartment, "Kurt smells like Teen Spirit." And it was written kind of as a slam to say, essentially, he smelled like this woman's scent. Kurt didn't understand that at all. That totally went over his head and thought it was a revolutionary anthem kind of line. And consequently, he sat down and wrote the song. The song really isn't about that event, but I think that that's what inspired the piece of graffiti.
No importa su origen, Smells Like Teen Spirit convirtió el grupo en superestrellas internacionales del día a la noche e hizo del grunge la música más popular y la moda del momento.
I don't know who made up the word grunge. I don't think that Nirvana ever said that they were a grunge band.
I just don't get it. I don't know. What is grunge?
Didn't it mean like just like the mildew on your shower curtain?
No one set out to market this music as that, you know, just, you know, that's what happens when the media catches on. They have to call it something. I like it as much as New Wave. I would have been proud to be a New Waver, you know, 15 years ago.
If grunge as a phrase meant anything, what it meant was a kind of fusion of the suburban metal instinct with the urban punk instinct. What Kurt Cobain in particular was gifted at was adding a little bit of pop to that. There was just, I mean, we all were raised with the Beatles in some context. He figured out a way to make the Beatles work somewhere underneath those other two layers.
The melody is beautiful. That's one of those things. It could be this loud grunge song, and you're supposed to play it with passion. It's real garage rock, honest music. But
load up on guns, bring your friends. It's fun to lose and to pretend.
That song is their song, and with every measure that I was putting down on tape, I was very clear that that was their baby. But she just hung out with me for a while, like a friend. Seeing that there's another side to that rage, that male rage that was being expressed. Because within all that male rage, there's something ripped up. There's something sliced open. I mean, that's obvious. So I was going after that.
It's a catchy song. It's a great power pop tune. The fact that there's this underlying message of anger and discontentment is almost secondary to the melodic hook.
The Beatles influenced everyone. Part of what made me want to become a musician was the ability to do what they were doing, which was to continue to stick up and say, hey, I think this is bullshit. I don't agree with this, and I'm gonna sing about it really loud. And you know, that's I still carry that with me today. You know, just that ability to not have to fall into the rat race and not have to you know, swim with the rest of the fish.
The whole thing that it said to me, and the whole thing Nirvana said to me, and their breakthrough said to me, and the way that the music sounded, was that you can hold on to your punk rock ideals, yet survive and thrive in the mainstream. And I know it sounds kind of silly now, but at the time that was a really big deal.
It was this, huge shift in music. And it kind of became, for a very brief moment, the soundtrack to Seattle. I mean, you'd walk down the street and it'd be coming out of one car, and you'd be walking by, a corner coffee shop, and they'd be playing Nevermind, and you'd walk to your friend's apartment and he'd be playing it. I mean, it was wacky how the song became the sound of Seattle for a brief moment.